Welcome back to Grace to Endure. This is our last video on this series of preparing to help a world in crisis. And we are going to be talking about preparing a place to serve from. So, your home or land where you live, knowing how to set it up as a place where you can benefit others. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about, is there ever a time when you maybe have to move or change places? Hopefully it never gets to that, but if it does, just some things to keep in mind or think about or start researching, just so you have your mind on those kinds of ways of thinking. We are, of course, getting this from Matthew 25:35, which says, I was a stranger and you took me in. And this is the same passage that we've been working through. If we are called by God to live during this time frame, it might be us that will need to take someone in. And so we need to have a place to take care of them. And so that's what this video is about. Okay, so Susan, help us to think about this idea of bugging in and bugging out.
The big bug in, bug out debate. So what does it mean to bug in, bug out, and why is it a debate? So most of us have heard the expression bug out, mean leave. And in our context, it's, do you stay in your primary residence or do you leave for whatever reasons to a secondary place? So the bugging in would be living where you are now. It's your home, you're comfortable there, you know where things are, your preps are there, your stored food and water and tools and things that you're going to need to live with. You know where things are in the cabinet. You know your what's around you. You may even be compromised by losing some services, water, power, whatever government services, but maybe others would still be there. But for most of us, most of the time, we're going to be bugging in because this is the property that we have prepared for, we're comfortable with, we know our way around. We don't have to make changes, and it's our safe place. So even if your home has been through a hurricane or some other type of storm, you kind of know what to expect, rather than leaving and not knowing what to expect.
Right.
So,
and then even I know that when we had a hurricane just recently come through, and I got on my phone this false alarm saying that it was mandated that everybody leave from our county. And it turns out some other people from our church also got that. And later they came and said, oh, this is actually a false alarm. We didn't mean to send that out. But for a few minutes there, I was thinking, the one thing I did not plan on doing was leaving. And so if it's a mandate to leave, oh no. And so that was a totally different way of thinking.
Right.
But it is something that we should think about, and I should probably think better about. But because if you leave, you risk all kinds of things. You risk having an emergency on the road. You risk getting split up from family. You could run out of gas. You can have weather that you didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
There are you can run out of food, water. There's so many things that could go wrong if you bug out.
Right.
So you need to think through that kind of a thing.
Exactly. So my husband and I figured we're going to bug in for our age and physical abilities. It's safer for us to bug in. But if there is a 100-acre forest fire coming my way, and they told me it's going to consume my house within the hour, I'm bugging out. I'm going to leave.
Right.
And I need to be prepared if that's the case. There's no last minute chance at that point.
Right.
So if you're going to stay, be prepared. If you're going to leave, be prepared.
That's right. And we'll talk more about bugging out in the next slide. So then what do we do, Susan, if we have to leave? It's the last resort, right, and we have to leave. What are some ways to?
Well, this is a judgment call, but at some point, if you feel like you would be safer somewhere else than where you are, and that can be a natural disaster, a man-made disaster, it can be a grid down, it can be all kinds of things. But at some point, if you decide it's not safe where I am and I must leave, Where am I going to go? And that's the planning that needs to be done ahead of time. It could be your sister-in-law's house in the next town. It could be property that you've prepared. If you have the opportunity on the money to prepare a property in a distance away from you that you think is a safer place, do it. Not everybody can do that. But then you know you have a place to go to. You may have an RV vehicle that is transportation plus living space. But think about where you would need to go, how you would get there, which gets into the transportation. Make sure you have maps, because GPS may not be, we come to rely on those. Have paper maps and know how to read them, know your north, south, east, and west. Know the back roads, have some alternative routes, and but have a plan ahead of time with your family or those that you're leaving with. What if we get separated?
And teach your kids. Like,
Yes.
probably all adults know the northeast, southwest, but do your kids know? And what if you get separated? I mean, trying to at least, they need to know their end, where you're trying to meet up. If things,
Right.
Short term, if somehow there's like, you run out of gas, you're on the side of the road, someone comes after you, say, okay, meet down at that thing that we just saw a mile back. But then long term, we know we're all trying to meet at, your Aunt Nancy's house, so like long term, where's the end goal and where's the short term goal, if something happens that you hadn't planned for.
So, depending on the emergency, there may be safety issues where you need to defend yourself, so you need to be prepared for that. Plan ahead for emergency care. Bumps and bruises can happen anywhere. If you have and they would call it a bug out bag. This will be a backpack where you put your essentials in. So you'd have a change of clothes, prepared for the weather. You'd have a little bit of food and water, some simple medical supplies, some
Flashlight.
tools. A flashlight would be obvious. You can actually go online and buy these pre-made, and there's hundreds, thousands of probably. I mean, go look and see what type of backpack best fits. It's already prepared. It's got a raincoat in it. It's got a little tent. I mean, whatever.
It's got ropes. It's got the different things that people run
Right.
into as their problems.
But then you want to individualize it. So if you need medication, if you have children or elderly people, you want to personalize that for your special needs. If you have a family, even the smallest child can wear a backpack. And my daughter has 3 young children, but the whole family have bicycles, and they all know how to ride well. And if they had to leave their home, they could each put on a backpack with enough for 72 hours, whatever, and leave it had to be pretty dangerous, but if they had to, they could do that. And so think through what options you would have and what you would need to have along the way, because you're still going to need the things you need at home, and it's not going to be as convenient. Right. So food and power and transportation.
That's right.
Those all need to be worked out ahead of time, because in the emergency, it's too late.
And you may be panicking, so not be able to think through it as clearly. Right. Okay, so whether you bug in or bug out, you could run into robbers, especially if there is, if the world is in crisis. So I think an important distinctive to make is the motives of the one that's doing the robbing. If you have a chance, sometimes there could be situations where you can't find that out. But if you can try to figure out if this person or persons are desperate because they've run out of food and they're trying to feed a family, okay? Someone who that's their situation, you can detect it. Their actions will be driven by fear and immediate need. They are going to be impulsive, unreasonable, probably not as planned out, probably not as many people with them, okay? They're probably looking for something that is quick and easy and not too hard to get a hold of. If you have a chance to find that out, and point E down here, if you can see if they're willing to negotiate or trade or work for food, this would be the best case scenario. If you're like, are you desperate? Have you run out of food? Okay, I don't have much food. I have a family here too, but I need, a guard for a certain part of my property. If you will guard every day at that, property line, then I will give you these rations, enough for them to get by. And so then you've actually created actually almost like a friend instead of someone who's trying to attack you. And now you've actually made your area safer. Okay.
Right.
So being able to, realize the situation someone's in, because we can't grow cold hearted and have no mercy. If someone is
Right.
desperate trying to feed their family and their children, we need to try to be able to recognize that if possible.
Right. It does
So.
assume that you have food resources that you've stored.
Right.
So hence another good reason to keep storing.
Right. And then point two is if this looks like an organized group that is, coming in and they're looking to take over or dominate, that is a totally different group, altogether. And so they're going to, the thing you have on your side, probably one of the only things you have on your side, is that they will also be trying to measure up if it's worth it, if it's worth the fight. Like how many defenses do you have? How many people do you have fighting? Like, is it really worth it? So, you want to give a big, hopefully you can make them think it's not worth it to do that. You're putting up enough of a fight. But it's going to be a lot harder to get rid of these kinds of robbers, and they might come in by force. So if you can hold them off with some of these things that we're going to mention, you might have time to bury things, hide things. That's kind of so that once they come in and they do raid your area, they won't find everything. So kind of thinking about that ahead of time is even better than just thinking about it when they're, already on your property. But, thinking that through ahead of time would be wise. Also upgrading locks and having dogs, dogs of any size, of course, can alert you to the fact that there is invaders on your property. But if you have a big dog, you even have a guard dog too. So you have another line of defense. So these are just some things to think of when times, get tough.
So we have to include self-defense, and prevention is the best defense. The front door is really not the place where you want to have a shootout, right? So if you can prepare your property so that people don't get onto your property, you've deterred that. If you secure the perimeter with lights, alarms, thorny bushes that people don't want to plow through,
Guard dogs.
guard dogs, things that would cause people to say, now I'll go to the next house. So preventing them getting onto your property is your first line of defense. A fence is a good idea. It kind of hides your property, but you don't want a 10-foot fence because you don't want it to look like, boy, I really got a lot of valuable stuff here. I gotta protect it. You just don't want to be overly noticeable. If you are running a generator or you have lights and you're the only one, you're going to stand out. So use it sparingly. Don't make your property look too attractive, like they would want to come on the property.
Right. You don't want to make it look like I heard someone else saying this. You don't want to make it look like in a time of distress, you're the only ones that are clean. You're the only ones with wonderfully washed clothing. You're going to stick out like a sore thumb, and you're just kind of asking people to come and, rob you.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Then let's talk about weapons. Decide on, lethal weapons and learn how to be good at them. If you're not good at it or you're not capable, you need to pick a different thing that you're going to be doing at this time. If the only thing you're really going to be any good at is bear spray, then get bear spray and just do that. If you have a gun and you're not prepared to fire it, you don't know how to load it, you're just making yourself a target, and you're not going to be helpful to anybody, and you're probably going to get yourself killed because you look like the threat that you really aren't, and so you're getting attention needlessly to yourself. Another thing is, I think telling kids where to be in these kind of situations so they don't run into the middle of a gunfight. That's another thing. And then back to the idea of, learning how to use a weapon well. This is something that I have done, through the years with my kids. And when they're doing like target practice and stuff, some of them have actually asked me, they're like, Mom, I want to bring you along because you always make me like a better shooter. Cause I am always like, saying things in their ear that like makes them like think like scenarios and like this happens, this happens, this happens. And if you do not get it right there in the target, this, and this could happen, or I don't get anywhere where I could get hit, and I don't try to compromise them for anything too serious, but I will like touch them and bang on them and come up and scare them from the back. And they know that I am going to try to do this because I'm trying to teach them to be a good shot under pressure. It's hard to have a moving target that you could practice on, but some people do invest in having moving targets and stuff, but it is much harder to hit moving targets. And when you're under stress, your heart's beating fast, you're stressed, you're scared. And so the closer you can kind of get to replicating that when you're practicing is probably going to make you a better shot, and better at your weapon throwing or whatnot. It's a little more fun and lively when you're practicing too. So,
practice.
Right. Practice, and don't pick a gun if you can't do it. And then make sure you practice loading your gun and loading it fast. That's part of owning a gun. It's part of, if you're going to pick that, you need to be ready to load it fast.
So travel and communication are some things we need to consider. If you do bug out and you're leaving your primary place, there's still a lot of things to work out. And one thing that is kind of important we haven't talked about, but it's making sure you take copies of your important documents with you. If you want to prove that these little kids you have with you are your children, if you want to prove that this is your car, or that you have health insurance, or a copy of your driver's license, maybe even your bank accounts, anything.
Or that you own that land.
Right, that you own your property. If you had to prove any of those things and you didn't have your primary source, have your primary source. It could be home in your safe, but also leave documents with a trusted relative or with your accountant in any case. But certainly if you're going to bug out, you can go online and buy document containers for bugging out. They're waterproof, they seal, and just get a copy of everything, put it in that, put one in at least one backpack, if not all, for the members of your family, so that you don't get stuck somewhere and not have just the essentials.
And all you needed was a piece of paper.
Right.
Yeah, that you forgot.
So however you're going, whether you're walking, you got to have good walking shoes and the right clothing and a backpack that you've worn before that you know works. If you've got a golf cart, terrific. You have a mode of transportation, maybe you can carry a few things. It does take fuel. Bicycles and golf carts can have flat tires, so you may want a backup plan for that. If you have a horse, there's some places horses can go that maybe cars couldn't even go. If you have an RV, we've mentioned that. That's a good thing. Make sure you have everything you need there and backups for that also. You want to have extra fuel. Stay fueled up. Have extra cans of fuel. In an emergency, what does everybody do? They go pick up the kids. They stop at the store. They get gas. And then they go home and start putting some things together. If you've done all that, you're ready to go. And so you're ahead of this crowd, possibly. But your whole family, whoever's leaving, needs to have communication among themselves. You've planned with your family where you're going, how you're going to do it, how you're going to stay in communication. And share with your family and friends. You may not be going with other people, but they need to know where you're going so that you can connect up at a later time. You want to choose your best roads and you have your alternatives. You know, the interstate can get really crowded. So can certain back roads, or they can flood. You need alternative plans using your maps that you're familiar with. Plan where you're going to stay. If you can't make your destination in one day, where will you sleep? You do want to have methods of communication. And I will be honest, there is nothing foolproof if there's a power outage or a grid down. Do the best you can. If you want to take a CB course and buy a CB set, it can be a great hobby and you can be a great benefit to other people. But if power goes out, you're going to need an emergency generator just to do your CB. Walkie-talkies are great. They're only for very short distances. They do need batteries, or you need to be hooked up to towers where you can extend your reach. If not, learn to use signals, flashlights, and mirrors. Old-fashioned, but if you
Morse code, right?
Morse code, yeah, if you want to learn that. But obviously, it has to be something that all the people that you want to communicate with know about ahead of time. So you would have prearranged codes. We're going to be here by this date. If we're not here by this time, you'll do this. Plan A, B, and C, and you'll be better prepared.
Mm-hmm. To wrap up, I want to bring our attention to James chapter 5, and I want us to read this end times passage with this in mind. We might be called by God to help large groups of people, and we might be the ones in charge or just ones that are part of those groups. Either way, the Bible actually gives us instruction for what to do during this time, and it kind of gives us insight as to what we might be tempted with. And of course, we're tempted with it now. So now we need to start maturing in these areas so that when the world gets in crisis, that we will already be mature in this area and be able to notice, oh, hey, I'm actually disobeying this verse entirely here, and then maybe correct it before it gets too ugly. All right, so let's look at James chapter 5, verses 7 through 11. I may not read the entire thing, but I would encourage you to read it for yourself. Therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts because the Lord's coming is near. Brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. And it goes on and gives an example about Job and how he had to endure great trials, right? And so this is actually a quote from Matthew 24 when it talks about that the Lord's coming is near and that he's at the door. It actually is referring to Matthew 24 when it says, when you see all these things, and it had all this list, the beginning of birth pangs, the great tribulation, the sun, moon, and stars going dark. And it says, when you see all these things, know that he's at the door and that now the time is near, okay, for his return. So during this time frame, all of this that we've been going through, I really believe that we will be tempted to grumble and complain at each other. Imagine how hard it is to grumble and complain at your own family when you're getting together for like pleasant events. Imagine if the world is in crisis. It would be natural, frankly, for us to just bite and tear each other apart. But this is not what the judge wants to see us doing. So it says, so that you will not be judged. So number one, pray for patience and endurance in these things, but start doing it now. Don't snap at your family. Don't snap at your husband. Try to stop. And if you can tell you're getting stressed, speak clearly about what's really stressing you out instead of snapping and biting and waiting until, you're so overwhelmed. Instead, maybe think about how you can organize your space, prioritize well, communicate. Make sure that you know your numbers. If you are helping, especially if you're in charge of big groups of people, you need to know how much resources you have so that you don't accept more in when you literally cannot take care of more, because then you're just setting yourself up for this grumbling and complaining and just, you get yourself in an impossible situation. So prioritizing, knowing your numbers, and then knowing the needs of all the people you're taking care of so that you can get on a schedule somewhat soon that will help you to manage well and not get so overwhelmed, because this is going to be an overwhelming time. Like like actually never before on the earth, right? So then also, if you can learn to designate jobs to other people, this is important. We see this when Moses was trying to take care of Israel and he was trying to judge for Israel. And his father-in-law comes and says, "Are you trying to take care of this all by yourself? You can't do this. You need to designate." This is a struggle I have. I will take leadership of something. I forget to designate. I just do it myself, and then I get overwhelmed. And if someone points out, "Hey, you're not designating," I'm like, "Oh, right, you're right. I'm doing that again." So, if we can help each other out in this way, just designate people, try to pick people that might be able to become good at certain tasks, even including kids, teaching them how to do certain tasks so you can work together. And it's not too much on the leaders. So then also having a sick room for people that are sick. Like, people will get sick. If you're taking care of any group of people for a certain amount of time, there's going to be times of sickness. So if you have a designated sick area, that way when you're entering the room and coming out of the room, you can kind of prepare, and less infection happens that way because you planned for it in advance. Thinking through how to keep the sleeping arrangements and the eating arrangements simple but good, what people need. And then try to hear, this is really hard, this is hard for all of us, try to hear the complaints as information that can help you improve instead of the complaints that they are. I mean, people should not be grumbling and complaining, but people do, and they usually grumble and complain at leadership. And if the leadership is super overwhelmed, it makes their temptation just harder and harder. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I hope this entire series has helped. And Susan and I really wanted to tell you, we know that these tips are definitely not all you need to know. This is not exhaustive, but our goal is just to stir you up to start thinking this way. And even as we've gone through this series, although we've previously taught about this years ago to a lady study at our church, we've grown in doing it again. We've learned new things. It's like, oh, I never thought of that. I should get better at that. I should get better at this, So we're really just trying to get you thinking along these lines and praying about it, asking for God's grace to endure, and just saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? And of course, it's not our desire for you to, go against, if your husband would think that this right here would be too extreme, don't do that. Just do it in part, and, be reasonable, with your resources and your time. But it is a good way to start thinking and training yourself in these kinds of ways.
Right.
And thank you, Susan, for coming alongside and helping. It's been fun. Okay.